Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 33rd episode of the Inbox, and today we're going to start off with a question from the Jawa clan saying, do you know if players will be able to run for Imperator? Imperator is going to be the head of the UEE, and I think the answer that we've gotten from CIG to this point several times has actually been that players are not going to be able to run for political office. That's going to be something that's really more exclusive to NPCs and really probably developer-developed characters. Now, with that, there's been talk, though, that we're going to be able to influence that in some way, by doing things like voting, or if you want to get very detailed, potentially there's the option for us to actually kind of like maybe sabotage people or to support people in various ways. So let's say you've got a senator from Terra who's running to be the Imperator, and they are responsible for bringing aid and lowering violence in the system. Like, that's their platform. Well, if you have a Hope-class vessel, you could, or maybe a large cargo vessel, you could kind of maybe pledge allegiance to that person and help support their cause by maybe providing aid. Or if you're a PMC type of organization, maybe you could then kind of go out and help rid the system of pirates. I think we might see those types of things to give us that feeling of supporting and interacting, and then based on that person's platform and how successful it is, it gives them a better chance of potentially winning the election. But yeah, I don't think it's ever going to be that you as the player can run for Imperator. Not only just because it's a really weird and big commitment for a player, but because I think it's just more of they don't want to give one player the ability to really run the UEE. Foible Gilneus says, some of the largest pirate organizations can now field 30 to 50 Idrises. How do you think CIG will be able to counter such a fleet when roaming the tradeways? So there's a couple things that I think are going to come into play here, and I don't think it's ever going to be CIG trying to address this. But one thing is kind of an unintentional preventer of this happening, and that's going to be the instant system. You're never going to be able to, and I probably shouldn't say never, but it's highly unlikely based on where we're at today and what the servers are capable of, and even what they talked about what they're shooting for, that you're ever going to have 30 to 50 Idrises all in the same instance, because that would be crazy. The system would just slow to a bog and you wouldn't be able to do anything. That being said, if you're talking about, you've got 30 to 50 different instances, all with different Idrises and other fleets, that may be something that ends up working out, and that's probably something that will work out. But if you're talking about just dealing with one Idris versus 30 to 50, that doesn't really become that big of a problem. So that's going to be the biggest thing that prevents these large pirate organizations from just shutting down an entire system, is the fact that you can have 2,000 Idrises for all I care. The system's never going to support all 2,000 of them being in the same place, in the same instance, and preventing you from doing anything. From a community standpoint, if there's going to be a group that's causing problems for everybody else, people are going to rally behind getting together and knocking them out. So if you've got, like a pirate organization in, I don't know, let's just say Stanton, and they're preventing the majority of the player population from conducting their business and making their profits, those players are going to get together and they're going to do their efforts to stop them from doing their activities. It's kind of that ebb and flow, that natural feel. Players are going to try and regulate what's happening, and I think the fact that we've got the reputation system in there and there's probably going to be economic benefits from actually helping out to stop a threat like that is going to be a very organic way to kind of counter a fleet like that. Saints in HD says, Youngblood, 2 questions. Do you think that the Carrack will ever be able to carry cargo? If so, how well do you think it'll do as a cargo hauler? The Carrack right now already carries cargo. The Carrack has the 3 detachable cargo pods at the bottom that give you over 1,000 SCU of cargo, so it's actually a really good cargo carrier. So to answer your question, yes it does, and yes it'll be a really good one. You mentioned that you've got a Prospector, a Constellation Andromeda, and we'll be getting a Carrack on the next sell for it. I think in your situation, the Andromeda becomes the ship that you use for smaller scale types of cargo runs, and if you really want to make a big profit or have a big contract, then pulling out your Carrack would allow you to carry more cargo as a result. So to answer your question again, yes, it's going to be good. Alejo Ruiz Camauer says, do you think that the Gladius should have its price lowered, or maybe the Avenger's price made higher? I think the Avenger outclasses the Gladius in pretty much every way. Both have good guns and shielding and speed. The Gladius is more agile, but the Avenger has heavier armor and has modules. Plus, it's cheaper and quite common in the persistent universe. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Avenger. I think you guys all know that. I think it's a really good ship. It's got good options. It's flexible. And I was a huge fan of the Gladius. Now, the Gladius has gone through a couple iterations, and I think back now that we're in 2.4, the Gladius is supposed to be performing better, although I haven't personally gotten in it to test it yet. I think the important thing to remember is two things. One, all of these ships are being changed constantly, so judging them head-to-head right now is good in theory, but it may be different tomorrow. And the other thing is CIG said a couple times that the ship price isn't necessarily directly tied to their performance in the universe. Now, I think as a community, we all naturally look to that, because when we're talking about making purchasing decisions, it only makes sense. You know, is this ship worth my money because there's a ship that's $30 cheaper that does better? So I think that makes sense, but I don't think you can necessarily look at the prices and say they're going to make adjustments to those. I think what you see in store, I think they're pretty firm on. The only ones I think you're going to see changes in price to are going to be ships that were in concept, and then they get more expensive when they're hangar ready, and then they get even more expensive once they're actually flight ready. Tap That Studio says, with hundreds of thousands of people wanting to be explorers and some probably not too worried about the concept of permadeath, what do you think is stopping people from doing suicide exploration in dangerous areas like Vandal RG and controlled space? The way the lore sets it up is that it's rarely been explored, but people who don't really care about death have little to worry about in this case. I think the thing that they need to worry about is the fact that if they don't make it back to civilized space, they can't share those finds. I think that's what we're going to see. You might be able to send a message to a friend who could then relay that message into the Ark, but I don't necessarily think you're going to be able to send all of your exploration data, because there's going to be huge amounts of data. So if you go into Vandal space, you map it out, and you get killed there, I think the data you collected is left there. So I think that's kind of an organic way that's going to prevent people from doing that suicide exploration that you're talking about. Now, people may go in and do a suicide run to see what's there, to see if it's worth going back to try and get the information to bring it back so they could share it and sell it for a profit. But I don't think you're going to see people be successful with that suicide exploration type of gameplay. Kermy44 says, when the game is fully fledged out, how much do you think the developers are going to be involved in progressing the story or metagame? The part of the game that progresses a story of some sort, how much of this is going to be affected by players? Will it be like EVE Online, where the story comes entirely from the players? Will it be like Elite Dangerous, where they seem to have more control around the universe? Or will it be somewhere in between? So I think it's going to be a combination of things. Players are going to be the key driver of economics in the game. So, if we're talking about, kind of what's happening in the universe, players are going to be buying and selling, and that's going to affect the overall stock market. So let's say players are doing a really good job of finding things like carbon. Carbon is probably going to be really cheap to buy because there's a high amount of it. But if players are having a hard time finding something like, iron, the cost of iron in the economy is going to be going up. So what we're doing in the universe is going to have a direct impact. I think it's really going to end up being a balance, though, as far as stories. I think the big events that are going to take place in the persisting universe are going to be stories that have been created by the developers, entered into the game, but how they play out is probably going to be very much dictated by us as players. I think elections or big wars, like those types of things, are going to be storylines, but organization battles, those are going to be very interesting for the player population to follow. And I think that's going to be things that just happen on its own, not necessarily based on anything that the developers are doing. So there's going to be a little bit of everything. It just depends on what the kind of what the developers are wanting to do and what the player community is wanting to do. And because all of those are going to end up impacting the overall meta of the game. Psychedelic says, do you think stealing someone's ship will work? There are too many ways to get around and insurance frauds. If people can get ships easily, it will kill the game. How do you think CIG is going to balance it? So we know you're going to be able to steal ships, but what we see right now in the game today isn't real indicative of what it's going to be in the end. Right now, when you see stealing ships, it's typically somebody running out to a landing pad before somebody else can get there and flying away with the ship. Now, once we actually get into the persistent universe and more things get developed, you're going to have the ability to lock your ship. You're going to have probably warning systems on your mobiGlass that somebody's opening a door on your ship. There's going to be things to help prevent it. Now, insurance fraud is something that they definitely need to address because it's definitely a possibility that it could end up happening. Now, the bounty system and, automatically being reported for stealing a ship, there's going to be different things that are going to help protect it a little bit. But the potential for insurance fraud is absolutely something that needs to be addressed because it could be a real issue for the overall game and people kind of getting around different systems designed to help you progress by buying ships. And for today's last question, it's Joe's Got More. Do you think that there's going to be consequences for shooting the wrong person in FPS? For example, when bounty hunting, will you be marked as a criminal if you shoot a patron in a bar when trying to shoot your mark as he runs away? Yeah. I think if you are bounty hunting, you've got a bounty for this person. If you shoot that person, I don't think you're going to end up with a bounty. But if you run into a bar, see Bill Jones, who's wanted for murder, and you end up shooting Sally Smith, who's sitting next to him, you're probably going to have a bounty on you as well. I think that is just going to follow kind of real world what we see today. If you shoot the wrong person, you're going to be in trouble, and especially if you're not officially a law officer. If you're kind of a hired bounty hunter, you're going to be in trouble if you're just randomly shooting people. So I think absolutely you would end up with a bounty in a situation like that. So it's going to really reward things like, you'd probably get in less trouble if you accidentally stunned Sally instead of actually shooting her. So maybe instead of that, you want to go up, sneak up behind Bill Jones and, tase him or hit him with like a six stick or something that's going to incapacitate him with limited risk to those people that are around. So there's going to be different ways that are going to be smarter to bounty hunt. So that's going to be it for this episode. I appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for more, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.